In this conversation, I have the pleasure of speaking with Joe O-Brien, the founder and chairman of Corvex Connected Safety. Joe is an entrepreneur. He's founded and managed numerous successful ventures in the medical device, safety, entertainment, and real estate industries. Joe embraces big ideas, as well as difficult projects. And in this conversation, we talked about how Corvex aims to transform worker safety and the importance of operational excellence. Hi, Joe. It's fantastic to see you.
It's great to see you, Kelly.
It's always wonderful to be able to talk to you. You've got such an incredible background behind you, but you've also got such an incredible vision about something that's so important, and that is the health and safety of workers. And you bring such an eclectic background from the entrepreneurial side, the innovation side, technology, scientific thinking, and your passion and behavior. Maybe our listeners might imagine that we've had some incredible conversations, some nerdy conversations, and some passionate conversations. I'd love to just take a moment and hear your story, your background. If you could take us through that, that would be awesome.
Sure. My pleasure. It's a typical, I would say, entrepreneurial background. If I go way back, my father was an entrepreneur and very involved in private investment. And I live in Minneapolis, St. Paul. There was a big medical device community around here when I was little, and I got the bug from him, if you will, and went to school, played a lot of rugby, bartended a lot, went to law school without ever the intention of becoming an attorney. Just really wanted to keep playing rugby and bartending for a couple more years, and then got into the medical device business, and very quickly kind of got the bug for new product development, new concept development. I'm a very curious guy, so over the years I've done I'd say a dozen or so startups, which is my favorite. I like to find a interesting problem and come up with a really great way to solve it. So I've done a lot of work in medical device, in healthcare, in some work in the hospitality and music business as a little departure, some industrial stuff, particularly around safety. I got into 10 years plus ago, and I've just had a lot of fun, some nice successes and a handful of failures as it goes, and really like it. This Corvex, the Corvex Connected Worker, the concept that you and I have been meeting over and talking about, that's the latest project, and that's a cloud software project in the frontline industrial worker space.
Yeah. I'd love to hear the pitch. So this is a good time to do the elevator pitch for Corvex so that people understand what the mission is, what the purpose is, and to get a little bit descriptive, what actually do workers benefit from?
Industrial work, if you go back to the nature of frontline industrial work and how we manage frontline industrial work, you go back quite a way. And the theories around industrial work looked at the frontline worker as sort of a cog in a machine, pushing buttons, doing repetitive tasks. And the theories would suggest that work had to be managed by someone smarter, who knew what should be done. The truth of the matter is that over the decades, the nature of frontline work has evolved, but the way that we manage it hasn't evolved. And frontline industrial workers, as a result, are disengaged. There's not a lot of transparency to the nature of frontline industrial work. Companies, leaders and managers in companies believe that work follows a sort of straight black line of process from start to finish, when in reality, it never does. Work doesn't go as planned typically, and frontline workers become frustrated. Gallup would tell you about 70% of frontline industrial workers feel disengaged. So our objective is to put technology in the hands of those frontline workers that helps them be smarter, be more aware, more agile, and more connected, allows them to contribute and share their voices, their ideas with their teams to deliver operational excellence, essentially. Better outcomes in safety, quality, and productivity. Really make them a more effective, more engaged part of their teams.
There's such a radical hypothesis in there. The radical hypothesis that if workers have a channel for their voice, and more importantly, workers have the opportunity to be accountable for their own safety and the safety of their environment, that will lead to not only better engagement by them, but a better and more safe environment. Such a radical premise.
Well, it is. It's also, I think, from our point of view, quite common sense. I mean, human beings make mistakes. And these are complex environments. When you help people, when you use technology to help people be more aware of their situation, be more agile, have the information that they need when they need it, and contribute their ideas, which they know best, typically, safety and performance increase. It's a radical idea from a historical, typical process management standpoint, but from a human standpoint, I mean, it makes a ton of sense to us anyway, and we're seeing great results.
So this idea it's one thing to have the concept of decentralization and bringing workers to the table. But obviously a key ingredient in this is the technology and the product vision that enables this. Can we get into some nuts and bolts in terms of, everyone's been thinking about digital and smartphones and apps and data and all of this kind of stuff. And it's nice at a theoretical level, but obviously you guys have very, very practical real world experiences.
We do. I mean, our platform is a cloud software platform with some light IoT elements. We deploy a series of beacons that allow the user to break a facility or a work area up into zones. And then all of the interactions between workers and their teams happen within that context of person, of zone, of the role that they're playing at that particular time. The goal is to use bidirectional data flow, information flow across this platform to create a transparency, a real-time transparency to the front line of industrial work, which doesn't exist today. At the management level, teams know what's supposed to be happening. They don't necessarily know what actually is happening. They're often quite different. So we use the technology to facilitate the creation of that transparency in real time. That transparency creates an accountability to action. So being aware of issues and opportunities in real time allows teams to take accountability to resolve those things more quickly. So really what we do is we accelerate, we help transparently identify and accelerate resolution of issues, safety issues as an example. A worker can make a hazard observation in real time. They can fix it and document that fix. They can escalate it, ask for help, and they might get a contribution from a safety manager 1,000 miles away who is part of that notification group, who knows how to fix it and can facilitate the elimination of that risk much more quickly. And that is a big part of what drives the result.
Let's talk about Beacon. I know that's an internal, it's part of the product suite. But for those who are not yet familiar with Corvex and haven't had a chance to read the materials that the firm has published, talk a little bit more about the device integration on that side.
Yeah, it's for us, location data, time, location, person, role data is very, very, very important. I mean, it helps identify risk, identify and locate risk, and allows teams to be more predictive. I mean, we'll take safety as an example. I mean, today, a safety management practice across multiple facilities, as an example, it's basically audit and inspection driven. It's planned according to the calendar, not according to where the risks are. And it's very reactive. Our goal in safety is to make teams more proactive. So by collecting data and information based on topic, based on zone, based on team, based on time, we've worked with you to start to define some risk algorithms around this data. How long, how risky is the area where something was identified? How long has it been unresolved? How severe is the potential injury from this issue? These types of things. And we roll those up into a risk score. So a safety manager can look at a dashboard, see all the zones in his facility or facilities, define where the system sees the most risk, and then address that risk in a priority manner. And, the combination of that transparency and intelligence for managers and leadership, combined with the ability of workers to identify these risks and watch them be resolved in a prioritized, smart way. Our customers are seeing significant reductions in reportable injuries. We've got several customers who've gone to 0 recordable injuries, which is, at least over the last year, which is always the target. Now, the technology is not responsible for all of that. The people are, but the technology facilitates action, changes in behavior, and drives that result. So it's good stuff.
That's awesome. Can we dive in a little bit more in terms of the role that BEworks played in helping build out your vision on the risk scoring side? I think that there are so many challenges that we face in terms of information being processed by leaders, as well as risks being understood. And this is right at the heart of behavioral science.
Right. We believe that in many ways, behavioral science is a significant part of safety. Not all injuries are based on behavior problems, but understanding, why people do what they do, why they take risks that they take, is a critical aspect of what we do. So early on, we took a look at some of these complex systems, and they are complex systems. And we started to think about how to be predictive, how to be proactive. So much of safety historically, safety in particular, is reactive, and still is today. We tracked you guys down and we had a couple of meetings and started talking about behavioral science, and taking a scientific approach to measuring and eliminating risk. And I think there was immediate resonance between you and I and some of the discussions that we had. So I think that was the genesis of it. And as we've been talking about recently, we look forward to taking that to the next step or 3 or 4. So,
who's your ideal client? Who are the kinds of what are the kinds of industries, and who are the kinds of leaders? Those are the 2 dimensions that I wanted to ask you about.
Sure. I think these concepts apply pretty broadly across across different industrial segments. I mean, from a penetration standpoint, we're discrete manufacturing, food manufacturing, automotive, utilities, energy and utilities are some of our biggest early implementations. But really, across the industrial landscape, these concepts are generally pretty similar. I think enterprises where safety can be lip service in a lot of organizations. We look for customers who take who have a little bit of a leading, take a thought leadership position in how to engage their frontline workforce in these improvements, safety, productivity, quality, and the like. They're all related. I mean, that's the key for us. Is the leadership, do they realize that their frontline workforce knows how to eliminate risks and solve problems on the floor in a real way that isn't process driven? I mean, we see so much, the people writing the processes and opining about how to solve problems have no experience with how the problems were created in the first place or how the work is done. So that's our focus, really, to find customers who are looking for technological solutions to make their frontline workforce better.
One of the points that you raised was having a leader that is looking for that sort of proactive leading indicators. They've got the commitment to a safe environment. Would you say that some leaders don't believe that workers can necessarily be a part of the solution? That either they feel that that's their job to make sure that it's taken care of at more of the head office level, or that they don't necessarily believe that the teams will have good ideas. What are those kinds of experiences? What's that look like to you? And what's it look like when you've had a leader, recognize that those kinds of ideas can come from within the team?
Many of those ideas still exist in industry. It's changing faster and faster. I think it's changing faster coming out of this, or knock on wood, coming out of this pandemic. But those points of view still exist. I think it's human nature when problems happen, when injuries occur, when processes don't work. I think it's human nature to identify human error as the problem and to blame. So we see sometimes leadership who looks at a frontline workforce who isn't performing effectively according to a safety or productivity metric, and they blame the people. When we get leaders who understand that people do make mistakes, and when you can use tools to help them solve problems, to help them be more productive, to help them be safer, that you start to align the vision of the frontline workforce with the vision of the organization, and it's magic. I mean, it's magic. It's magic in safety. I mean, people start to almost humanize our technology sometimes and think of it as a machine that solves problems. Consider an old school way of approaching these things where a worker sees a safety hazard. They follow an analog process. If they're engaged, they fill out a card. They drop it in a box. The box gets collected 3 or 4 weeks later. Somebody puts it into a spreadsheet, maybe prioritizes it. Maybe a work order gets created to solve this problem. Meanwhile, that worker every day has identified something that they think could hurt them, and they walk by it every day, seeing nothing change and nothing happen. That doesn't motivate them to feel like they're part of something. It doesn't motivate them to help solve these problems. It makes them believe that nobody cares. So when you put a little bit of technology in that worker's hands to help accelerate those mitigations, give them a voice and show them how their voice is being heard and addressed in real time. It's magic. They become involved and engaged and start to solve more and more problems on behalf of the company. We had one customer when we started with them, they had an analog hazard process, and their average time to close a hazard observation was 42 days. Within 4 months, they were identifying 2 or 3 times as many hazards at this particular site, and their average time to close all of them was 2 days. So, these workers were expressing frustrations that they'd expressed for a long time, but that transparency that the technology gives and the accountability that it creates drives results.
What an energizing kind of safety sweep and transformation that must have been.
Yes, I mean a culture change, really a change in the way this stuff is handled, from top down reactive to bottom up proactive approach. And you can't argue with the results. I mean, when you look at the KPIs that people use around some of these things, there's fundamental change. BEworks has done work in safety before. I mean, how do you see the link between some of the work that we've done and previous work that you've done, the science of behavioral psychology and safety? I mean, what's your point of view?
Well, I think I can build on something that you had already illustrated, which is that we have, as humans, as leaders, we're guilty of committing a thing called the fundamental attribution error. We assume that it's so-and-so's fault. It's that guy's fault. He made a mistake. And we don't recognize the systemic precursors to those errors. This fundamental attribution error has a really, I think, neat way to describe it, or to illustrate it, which is, imagine that you're driving down the road and someone cuts you off. And sometimes our first impulse is just to assume that the guy's a real jerk. He cut you off, he pulled right in front of your car. And we think something about him, his personality, his character. And we fail to think that maybe his mirror just angled it a certain way and he didn't see us, or he's in a certain headspace, or there's an emergency going on and he's actually just a really nice guy, but in an unfortunate set of circumstances. Or again, there was something, about the way the mirror in his car was set up. And so leaders need to make that shift from thinking that it's the worker is lazy or incompetent, or they're not motivated, or they're not educated, or, it's all resting on the individual's shoulders, as opposed to recognizing the systemic factors that serve as barriers to the behavior change that we want to see. And so that, I think, is one of the philosophical aspects of the drive behavioral economics, is that we need to recognize what's called the choice architecture of our environment. And we need to recognize the role that these biases, like this fundamental attribution bias, fancy word to deal, or fancy kind of concept to deal with this misrecognition of the balance between, individual agency and then the systemic factors that inhibit our success.
I agree. I mean, we see it all the time. I mean, applying blame with fundamental attribution bias. It also causes managers and leaders to not recognize the complexity around a lot of these, especially in these in industrial environments. There's a lot happening all at once, and when mistakes happen, it's there's an effort to simplify the solution, right? To jump immediately to solving the problem without taking the time to really understand how the different stakeholders view that problem, how they think it happened, why it happened, what may have led to that. There's often a cascading effect of, change and deviation from a process that's led to a failure. And we think that collecting data, structured and unstructured data around these subjects in a thoughtful way, and then applying some, scientific analysis to the information overall can help teams, giving them tools to do that when they're not behavioral scientists necessarily, can help them overcome some of this stuff and lead to a big result. I mean, another, a question I've had for you too, and I've asked you this before, how do we, as a scientist, how do we study this, right? I mean, we're in these facilities all the time, and we're operational guys, we're software guys, we're looking at how people do things, but we're not scientists. So how do we, working with you, and as I said, you and I have talked about this a lot, but how do we bridge that gap? How do we study it and find the right solutions?
Yeah, I think you're getting into an area that's probably the area that drives most of my passion for my work and for this field of behavioral science. And that actually just gets to the nature of what is scientific thinking itself. And by that, I mean, first of all, it's recognizing that, we have to gather these observations in the world. And, that's the data, or that's what we see with our own eyes. But the first thing that we need to do is to question what we see. My experience walking through a factory might bring a certain set of observations, which will be different than someone else's. So we need to be willing to question what we see. And one of the ways to do that is through just large scale ongoing data collection and data analysis to help challenge our perception of individual events so that we can see larger timelines and larger trends that might shape our individual perception. So you have to aggregate that data constantly. Data is the first thing that lets us mature past those very salient, very necessary, very human stories and anecdotes and individual experiences. But when we start to gather that data at scale, we're able to separate out what looks like a major incident from the fact that there might be hidden patterns. So that's one of the first fundamental elements of approaching these things with scientific thinking. But a complementary tool to use is to just constantly ask, how do you know? How do we know? How do I know? It's to just use that as a very provocative question to help us go, actually, we don't have good data for this. We are just using our intuition. Sometimes that's okay, but we need to know what those sources of the data are, because then that allows us to look at where biases and statistical fallacies and these other bits of noise that might mislead us into a misunderstanding of either what the reality is, or lead us to see what we think we want or hope to see. So those are some of the fundamental approaches to how we how we see things in a certain way. So make sure you have data long term and as much as you can to analyze. Constantly ask, how do you know? How do I know? How do we know? And then third, recognize that our perception is naturally misshapen in many ways by bias. That's right. That foundational. That's that first step.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. We're on that journey, and we're having fun with it. No question.
So I want to talk to you about scientific thinking in general, and How did you go on that journey? So many people are just shoot from the hip. I use my gut. I know it when I see it, and they're very comfortable with this way of thinking. It's a challenge. It's a big challenge in leadership. We got a lot of ego gets kind of caught into the mix of this, and it becomes a lot harder sometimes to challenge people's belief systems, to challenge their experience. If it's tough for them to have that scientific lens, which is, I don't want to say more humble, because I don't necessarily mean to say that leaders are arrogant just because they have intuition, but it's a different kind of a mindset. And of course, I fancy myself as an evangelist of scientific thinking, and believe very much that it'll, transform society and the economy. Love to hear your perspective on scientific thinking.
Well, yeah, I mean, I studied business and law, and I'm a liberal arts guy. I'm not a scientist. I think for me, my interest in scientific thinking as applied to a lot of the entrepreneurial activities that I have probably comes from my initial background in medicine and healthcare. I spent a lot of time in operating rooms when I was a younger man, watching procedures and designing medical devices to conduct those procedures, basically. And it's a data and a data-driven, science-driven activity and enterprise, right? And as I left that field and started to get into other businesses, that I think that came with me. And overall, I think that we're undergoing a big paradigm shift in the leadership of business, and I see it today more so than I did 10 years ago. And I think 10 years from now, it will be firmly entrenched. But data is the king, and effective analysis and use of that data typically wins, which isn't to say intuition and good strategy can't win, but if it's based in data, and if scientific thinking is applied to that data without bias, in a smart way, I think the odds of success improve dramatically. I mean, in business, one area that you see this now profoundly is in marketing, right? I mean, marketing used to be witchcraft, right? Creativity and just artful communication. Today, it's completely data driven. I mean, they're the message has to be right, but if you follow the data, immediately whether it's right or wrong, and you adjust. And I think most of our business practice is starting to follow, or will soon follow that same approach. I think the frontline nature of industrial work, where we're playing, is kind of on the tail end of that. I mean, these frontline workers have been viewed as not data generators, right? I mean, you look at the integration of IoT technology. The first effort in industrial organizations is to put sensors on machines, and to collect data from those machines to get more scientific about how, to improve output or improve quality. People have tried to put sensors on workers and collect data without providing any feedback to the frontline worker. And it doesn't work, because workers are humans. So if you can engage that worker in the creation and collection of data, and in the scientific method to solve problems, that's where we're headed. And we think that's, really the next inflection point around a lot of these, in a lot of these situations. So.
Well, it's such a powerful philosophy, and the proof is in the results that we've seen. So that's the success story between Corvex and its customers, and your partners who are proud to be on the journey with you. Joe, one of the things that you talk a lot about is operational excellence. And I wanted you to explain what that means to you, how it improves not just productivity, but what you also talk about in terms of retention and as well as other business factors.
Well, to us, I mean, they're businessy words, but to us, operational excellence is a headline for safety outcomes, quality outcomes, productivity outcomes, and I would add sustainability and innovation outcomes or continuous improvement outcomes under that headline. So it's a title that measures, I think, the major success or failure factors, high level of an organization. Our philosophy around driving operational excellence is including the people who do the work at the front line every day in these organizations, whether it's a construction business or a food manufacturer or a logistics company, right? By taking the scientific study of operational excellence all the way to the edge, to use a computing term, right? Collecting data at the edge and transmitting data and information back to the edge to make the machine work better. We drive operational excellence in measurable real-time ways and accelerate the practice of operational excellence. It becomes for us less about studying what happened last month or last quarter and trying to figure out how to improve it, but analyzing what happened 10 minutes ago and trying to figure out in real time, collaboratively, using technology, how to take advantage of that, whatever that is, to drive improvement in one of those categories, right? On the safety side, it's measurable safety outcomes. How many people get hurt? How badly are they hurt? What does that cost that person and their company? Right? Quality outcomes, self-explanatory, right? Productivity outcomes, also self-explanatory. A lot of the processes that have driven these over the last decades, quality management systems, traditional top-down EHS, environmental health and safety systems, lean practice, these processes don't engage. They don't work at the edge very effectively. And we see that as the shortcoming. By driving these practices all the way to the edge, to the last worker on the organizational chart, right? And engaging them, providing a way for them to be heard and included in driving operational excellence. We really see an acceleration. Worker retention right now, at least in the United States here, I know you're up in Canada, Kelly, but it's the largest industry. Frontline worker attraction and retention is the largest risk facing a lot of these organizations. They can't hire people and they can't retain them. They're measuring turnover in weeks sometimes. We had a customer we talked to the other day. They have over 70% frontline turnover a year. So, they can't hire and keep people fast enough. And one of the reasons is they don't engage. They don't engage them. So, talk about sustainability. It's a human resource. Sustainability is a significant issue, and we've proven that by giving people a voice, listening to it, and responding and reacting in positive ways, it starts to change that. We see well above double-digit, reductions in frontline worker turnover in the plants that are using our system. So it's exciting.
Well, Joe, I've got one last big question for you.
Oh,
What's your hope for the future in terms of worker safety and performance? Where do you think it's going to go? Where do you want it to go? And hopefully those are the same.
Yeah, I would like to see a world where most, if not all, frontline industrial workers feel like they're doing something important. They feel like they're part of a team, and they have the tools and technologies like ours in their hands to make the nature of their work safe first of all, and rewarding, personally rewarding for them. And I think, through COVID-19 here, I think a lot of organizations have realized the importance of that. These frontline workers are people. They're not immediately replaceable with another body, and that companies need to invest in making them safer, making them more agile, helping them improve, and just making them feel like they're part of something valuable. So that's what drives what we do in a big way. And we think, per this conversation, we think we can apply some really strong scientific thinking and some computing and technology and data science to help make that vision a reality.
That's fantastic. Well, we learned through a lot of our research during COVID-19 that so many of the changes put pressure on belonging as well as psychological safety. And psychological safety is a concept that refers to a worker feeling comfortable, being able to critique things that they see, to feel comfortable and safe that this won't have a negative consequence on their employment or their stature within an organization. It means feeling that you can say these things, but also have confidence that these insights will go someplace.
Right.
So that sense of belonging and that psychological safety are two of the most fundamental tools for worker satisfaction and happiness and engagement, and many of these more aspirational goals that you've talked about that go way beyond worker safety and into more fundamental business success across the board. And that's something that you've always talked about, Joe. You've always made this relationship between worker safety and business performance, and tying those things together, I think, is the thing that might ultimately help organizations feel that safety isn't just a cost recovery item as a must do in a regulatory compliance mindset, but instead is a strategic asset for a culture of safety that is also in tandem with business success.
Well, I couldn't agree more with that.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for your time. It's always wonderful to hear your insights on such an important topic. I hope that people have approached this particular conversation with maybe walking away with more about scientific thinking, with thinking about the role of data and devices and technology and apps coming together in new ways to transform our workplace. Thank you so much for your wonderful insights.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Kelly. It's great to talk to you.